Hi, everybody, and welcome. My name is Jackie Pierce. I am an assistant professor of English at Lake Sumter State College in Central Florida. And so I'm coming to you today from the Sunshine State. I'm a little jealous. I see fall leaves in some backgrounds, and I miss my falls. But I am happy to be here with you today. A little bit about me. I am one of our faculty mentors at our institution. We work directly with the e-learning department and other faculty members to help them build Quality Matters certifiable courses. And I have been very happy to be involved with QM for quite a few years now. I am a certified facilitator for the APPQMR. I'm also a peer reviewer, and I have really enjoyed delving into the Quality Matters um, materials, mostly because I was extremely resistant to online learning when I first started teaching online. So this has been quite a journey for me. Today's outcomes, today we're going to focus on feedback. And I'm sure that for those of you who teach, you sometimes feel like you give out a lot of feedback and you spend a lot of time providing feedback. And sometimes it feels like you're just shouting into a void and typing into a void. So we're going to look at various feedback strategies, styles, and tools. We're going to talk about how to create engaging feedback for student work. And then I'm going to focus a little bit on LMS tools to provide feedback and to ensure students receive their feedback, which I think is probably the most important aspect of this discussion. So, one of the questions, of course, is what is feedback? How would we define it? And I liked both of these definitions. One, dictionary.com called it an information about reactions to a product, a person's performance of a task, etc., which is used as a basis for improvement. And I think that most of us in faculty roles really believe that that basis for improvement part is the key. I'm not just telling you what you did wrong to tell you what you did wrong. I want you to actually improve on those things. And then I thought forimpact.org had a really interesting definition as well. Feedback comes in three forms: appreciation or thanks, coaching, here's a better way to do it, and evaluation, here's where you stand. I think there's value in that definition in the sense that when we provide feedback to students, we need to address perhaps all three of those elements. We've all been taught to be appreciative, to tell them what's good, to show that kind of enthusiasm. But there's also the part about I'm evaluating you, as well as coaching you how to do it better the next time. So I would love to hear from a few of you as far as what your questions or concerns, or what are some of the things that you worry about with feedback. And I know it's going to be hard for me to see the chat, but if you want to put some items in there, I will take a look at it. Oh, Amelia's comment. I love that. That's much more useful a framework than compliment sandwich. I agree. Because sometimes I feel like when we open with something good and we close with something good, that's all the students see. They don't ever get to that meat part. Scalability, getting students to read it. Martha, I am with you on that one. Do the students actually look at it? And that, of course, I think is part of the key here. How do you really know if students are reading and understanding the feedback? We all seem to have similar issues. I get emails asking, oh, love that one, Wendy. I also get emails, and I think I just literally answered this email before it came in the feedback. Spending hours and they don't read it. I mean, I'm an English teacher, so you know how much time I spend grading papers. It's insane. Oh, that's a good one too. Trying to separate feedback from grades. And that is really hard for students to do. For some people, if the score has 2 points missing, it's the end of the world. et cetera, et cetera. It's a little bit crazy. Yes, and so we have, Melissa says, I have a faculty member who said she has the students reflect on the feedback with a plan to implement it. And that is one of the things we are going to talk about today, is some of the strategies for doing that. So let me go ahead and talk about, let me see if I can get this out of my way. I know you guys are not seeing the same thing I am, but I have like 4 screens in front of me. There we go. Building assignments and rubrics. So for me, good feedback starts before they ever turn anything in. And I think that in an online learning environment, we are kind of already into that, in the sense that, we can't really necessarily do things on the fly in a fully developed online class. We have to plan for those things in advance. And so that's what I want to focus on first, is the idea that how we build our assignments and rubrics will automatically kind of help us with that feedback piece. So we've got several building blocks. Number one, of course, is clear criteria. I am super, super, super specific in my assignments as far as what I'm looking for. So when I tell somebody it needs to be a 3-page paper, I go further than that, and I explain to them that if your document is double spaced and 3 pages long, then your works cited page should not be occurring until at least page 5, because you will have some text on page 4. Like, I really dig into the criteria and explain what that means. The rubric, or how it's scored, should give some immediate feedback. Of course, we name the categories, things like, format and documentation and grammar and punctuation, and how they score in each of those individual sections should indicate to them where they have problems and where they are doing pretty well. But we have to be able to remind students how to use a rubric both before and after that assignment is graded, because they don't come to us necessarily knowing how to use that rubric or how to interpret that rubric. So we have to do some things in our online classes, build some resources in there to help them get that information. So I've got a sample from my class, and I'm not going to read this to you. The PowerPoint has already been uploaded to the QM website. So if you want to take a deeper look at this, you certainly can. But you'll notice again that my requirements are pretty specific. It's got to be MLA. Of course, I'm an English teacher. Photos and other visuals are not required, but must be cited if used. They do not contribute to the length requirements for the paper, of course, just like the works cited page. All quotations and paraphrased information from research must be clearly cited, both on the works cited page and internally through the use of parenthetical citations. This particular paper is not for one of my English courses. It's for a leadership development class that counts as a student success course. And ENC 1101, our basic freshman composition, is not a prereq for this course. So there are a lot of materials within the course, within the Canvas shell, to help them with it. And of course, I meet with them separately if they want to, and things of that nature. So they do get instruction on how to do this, but it's not an English course. So we do not spend a lot of class time on it like we would in some others. And then of course, I've got the focus of the paper and the grading information. I also have a quick JPEG here of the rubric. This is a 200-point assignment, so this is a pretty substantial part of their grade. And you'll notice how it's broken down into the categories. One of the things that I have started doing with my rubrics is only using 3 stops along the way and a 0. I used to have really elaborate rubrics where I had, here's the A and here's the B and here's the C, and it just got a little cuckoo crazy. So I actually started using sort of the template that Canvas provides, which only has 3 stops along the way. And I honestly have found myself feeling much better about it. So I use the terms proficient, competent, and novice in this class. And of course, no marks means you didn't do it. And you'll see the grade breakdown. I try to have important things be worth more points. Obviously, MLA, the format, the works cited, and the internal citation are all separate graded items on the rubric, because somebody could have a beautiful works cited page but not have any internal citation. So I want to give them as much information just on the rubric as I can. And so that's how I've kind of developed these. Now I will be honest, I redevelop rubrics pretty much every semester, because something will come up that I forgot to put in, and I'll realize, oh, I should have said that. So, but this is a good sample one, and it's pretty similar to what I use in other classes. The other thing I've done with my rubrics, and I don't know what learning management system all of you use, but I like to put the good news at the beginning of the rubric and the zero at the other end of the rubric. But I've noticed that most learning management systems, if you just pull up the rubric, do it the opposite way and start with the negative and then work up to the positive. So this is my attempt at being a little bit more pro coaching, happy teaching, good thoughts person. But I find that students react pretty well to it as well. So one of the things, of course, that I feel like we have to do is provide some sort of previews. In other words, demonstrating how to locate that feedback, because again, the students don't necessarily know it. Even if they have gone through a Canvas orientation or a Blackboard orientation or whatever the case may be, they typically forget if they ever learned how to locate that feedback. So I always provide previews. In QM terms, of course, one of the places I do that is in the startup module. And I usually do it by video. Canvas, I like in the sense that I can turn on the student view. I can use my sample student and I can record the actual student walking through and looking at his or her grades. I work in Blackboard sometimes as well, and the version I'm using there right now does not have that functionality. I cannot see what they see, which I find a little bit frustrating. So one of the things that I've done before, if I do not have access to a student view, is I will ask a student to work from my class to work with me and have them demonstrate it. And I will, make sure that none of their private information gets out, but to have that student view and to let them see it. I've done it through both video and through screenshots. I find that video is a little bit easier for students to manage, but screenshots, of course, are good, because even if you don't have fast streaming internet and things like that, having a visual image is going to be helpful for the students there. You know what they say, variety is the spice of life. And so the tools I find, I like to vary the tools that I use when I give feedback. I am going to, before I get too much further, because I saw that we have some items in the chat, just make sure I don't have any questions. Thank you. I like to separate things out. One of my pet peeves when I finally learned about measurable outcomes was that as English teachers at my institution especially, we have a tendency to lump 14 things in the same rubric point, which now drives me crazy, because even though I'm an English teacher, I now agree that measurability is a good thing. So I think the fewer items you can assess in each rubric point, the better. Yes, we will talk about that idea of embedding comments directly into the paper as well, as opposed to looking in the rubric only. Yeah, I think if you don't teach them how to look at both or whatever you're using, you're kind of setting yourself up for frustration. Do you define those ratings for students? Yes, and I talk about that when we go over the first rubric, to help them interpret what those things mean. What is the difference between proficient and competent and novice? It's not A, C, F, even though that's the way they want to think about it, because it's kind of those stops along the point system. And point ranges. I do use point ranges on some. I tend to try not to, simply because a couple of times I've gotten into situations where people are like, well, why didn't I get 2 instead of 1? Like, I don't know, because You were a 2. So it can be frustrating, but I agree. The points range is helpful as well. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the tools. Marked up documents, which of course you just mentioned in the comments. As an English professor at a community college, I typically have 3 sections of freshman composition each semester, which means 66 or more of the same assignment comes in on the same day, plus all my other classes. And I found that if I were trying to do everything in Microsoft Word with marked up documents, I was not able to get grading back in a timely fashion. So I like to pick and choose where I use marked up documents. It's not that I don't still use them, because I do think they're valuable. And again, it comes down to training them not only to look at the rubric, but to then open the document. And we'll talk a little bit about that. The comments boxes, of course, all the learning management systems have that little feedback to learner, or whatever the various ones call it. There are times when I put all my comments in that. Because it's right there, it's very visible, and I will use like a bulleted list or whatever, rather than using a marked up document. It sort of depends on what the assignment is. For a discussion board where I'm not looking as closely at things like grammar and punctuation, I definitely don't use marked up documents on discussion boards. But for formal papers, it depends. Some of them, especially early in the semester, I may use a marked up document. Late in the semester, when they're not going to have a chance to do any revisions anyway, because we're almost done, I'm going to use just the comment boxes usually. And then something I've started incorporating lately is video and audio feedback. Now, I was resistant to this because I absolutely cannot stand myself on videotape. I do not like to listen to my voice once it's been recorded. I grew up in Springfield, Missouri, and I'm like, who is that hillbilly who made this recording? When I listen to my own voice sometimes. But I have started embracing video and audio, especially the more that I train on quality matters issues and classes, because students really do respond well. I typically do not use video for feedback, but I use the audio feature, and I'm going to show you a short video that that demonstrates that. Let me double check the questions quickly, and then I will go to the next slide. Yeah, one of the comments was about Blackboard. As I mentioned, I do teach for a school that uses Blackboard, and I don't even have it as an option in Blackboard. So I don't use it there either. But for Canvas, it works really well. And that's what you're going to see here in 1 second. So let me go ahead and do that. Greetings, everybody. Welcome to a quick demonstration of using the auditory recording tool within Canvas to grade and offer feedback on papers. Let me share my screen with you. I have here in my demo class just a sample that I've put in under the student, sample student. So I click on there to do my grading. And in Canvas, you have the option of creating a media comment, which is what I have been using. I always put something in the assignment comments along the lines of, I'm going to skip over this a little bit. I hate watching myself type on screen. That way they know not to just leave a comment here. I don't know about you guys, but a lot of times students will leave a comment after have gotten a grade, and I won't see it because Canvas does technically sort of tell me it exists, but I always like to give them that information. So I submit that. In order to view the paper and do the video or do the audio recording, it is a good idea to have it open in Microsoft Word And then you can click on media comment. It will start with video. I always turn off the webcam. I suppose I could do that at some point, but I have not gotten that brave yet. And then we start recording. Now, you may or may not be able to see, but what I have in front of me is the paper itself. And so I will literally go through and read the paper, not read it aloud, but read the paper and comment as I go through. This enables me to make grammatical and format changes without spending the time making those physical changes. So let me stop sharing that for a second and show you the paper and what that would look like, because I'm still recording. So let's open that. We need to make that big enough to actually see. That would be great. So I always start with the works cited page and the general formatting. General formatting for this paper looks to be in good shape, and we are using proper quotation marks for our short story title. So that's awesome. Scroll down with me, student, and we will take a look at your works cited page before I actually read the essay itself. You have the citations for the story and your 2 required secondary sources, both of them coming from our Lake Sumter Library resources, which is fantastic. They are in alphabetical order. Excellent so far. Now I will go back up and I will read the essay. And that's what I do. I go through the entire thing. If there are problems with documentation, I let them know. If there are problems with grammatical mistakes or things of that nature, I can do it as I go through, referencing the paragraph number and so on and so forth. So that is how I. There you go. Greetings, everybody. Welcome. Oh, no, stop. Auditory. Stop, woman. I apologize for the Zoom within the Zoom within the Zoom. I feel a little like we're in Inception today, but it is the one thing that I find is kind of tricky is when you have to stop sharing and reshare. So I wanted to, I just did that on video instead of doing it in person. Tracy made an excellent point that I would love to address here before we go any further. She says, I have kept track of commonly used comments for assignments in a doc so I could copy and paste rather than, I love it. I call it my phrase bank. And I usually keep mine in Excel so that I just have to take like the whole little thing. But yeah, I want the feedback to be organic. So that's one reason I kind of like the audio comments. And it's less frustrating for me in audio form when I am saying the same thing over and over and over again, as opposed to when I'm typing it out. So if I am using typed comments, I absolutely keep a phrase bank handy because I get really, really tired of saying the same thing over and over again. Copy and paste is a beautiful feature for making feedback. So in terms of following up, I think with the feedback, practice is going to make perfect. So how do we hammer it home? Feedback quizzes. And I know that's a little weird. The term quiz is a little hard, but using your LMS, you can make some kind of quiz, even worth 0 points, to make them answer questions about their feedback. And I don't use this a lot, but I do find that it can be really helpful. And it's one of those things that if you do it on the first assignment, you probably don't have to do it on subsequent assignments. I've even had similar success with the self-reflection type assignment where it's just you have to email me and respond to what I said. It's not as much of a quiz feature. But again, if I do that for the first 1 or 2 or 3 assignments, then I don't have to do it for the rest of the semester if I get them in those good habits early. Required revision, of course, for English teachers, that is one of our big ways that we can use feedback is to say, hey, I gave you the feedback, now you got to fix it. I will say I do not do that very often. As I mentioned, when one has 6 English classes in a semester, one does not have a lot of time to look at papers twice. So I typically do not use required revision for all of the papers. But again, I think that's one of those things. If you can do that on one of the early assignments and they can get that sense of accomplishment of here's what happens when I do read the feedback and I learn from it, then I think it's a valuable exercise. And certainly when I have large assignments and I'm going to do some kind of peer review, I will also take a look at those and I tell them I am not grading this. I am not going through it with a fine tooth comb, but I will give you feedback. In fact, one of my chores today is I'm giving feedback on a rough draft. And I tell them up front, I'm only looking to make sure that your documentation is in place and the formatting is correct. That's the only thing I'm looking for. If you want help with your grammar and punctuation, you can ask for that, but this is not what this feedback is for. And I think communicating that, whatever the feedback is going to have, is a big part of that, to let them know what it is for. So feedback quizzes, required revision, self-reflection assignments are ways that we can really, hammer it home, so to speak. So I would love to take some time here and hear from you guys as far as takeaways and other ideas. I see that we have one other. Oh, Joan makes a good point. If it is 0 points, most of my students won't participate. I know, right? It's so sad, especially when QM really encourages us to do learning activities that are low stakes. So one of the things, of course, you can do there is maybe not have it worth 0 points, but also have it be something super small so that it is still low stakes. You could always set it so they can't move on. Oh, that's true too. Setting things up to where you can't get to the next piece until you look at your feedback. That's a great suggestion. Activity completion, absolutely. My assignments are worth 100 points and they do not get the last 10 points. Ooh, I like that, until they respond to my feedback. That's one of the things I used to do with being on time. Some of my assignments still have the on time piece in the rubric, but that's a great idea, is to say, hey, right now you're still only out of 90, but when you do this last piece, you will get all 10 of those points, and have that be a, kind of pass fail thing. I love that suggestion too, as does Sabrina. Or gain back points on the original assignment. That's another good one. One of the things I have done in a required revision, and usually I make it to where if you got above an 80 out of 100, you don't revise anything. But if you got below an 80, you have to give me a required revision. Sometimes I'll even make it above 90. And then if it's between 80 and 90, you have the option to revise based on the feedback. And if it's below 79, you have to. And I typically do not completely regrade the paper based on the original rubric and go through the whole rigmarole again. When I do those kinds of required revisions, I will typically tell them, okay, if you make all the changes that I have suggested, you will earn up to X number of additional points. So if I'm only giving it to people who made 79 or lower, usually I'll bump them up by 10, sometimes 20, depending on the severity. If it was one of those situations where everybody did poorly on the assignment, and I realized that that was probably due to something that I didn't do in communicating, then I will offer more points for that. So that works really well. Gaining back points on the original assignment works really well. What other takeaways, feedback, questions, etc.? Short self-reflection with revisions. I like that. So And I think that is really an important aspect of this, that getting the students to reflect on why they are needing to do what they do, and to enunciate that, to actually say it. I think that's a really good suggestion. I also have my students provide peer feedback on it. Yes. Um, I have gone back and forth over the years as an English teacher with peer review, because just like anything else, it can become something that they either don't take seriously, or that they're not getting any real help, or they perceive that they're not getting any real help. So I think with the feedback, and the in that feedback loop, if you're using peer reviews, it's just really important to maintain the dialogue, and to really give out very clear directions to the students of how to provide that fear. Oh, that actually was a pretty good word choice switch there. But the peer feedback, not the fear feedback, the peer feedback, that is, I also try to explain to them that if you don't agree with what your peer told you, it is ultimately your own paper. So, I mean, even if I tell you to do something and you don't want to do it, or let's say you go to the Learning Center, or you get the Writing Center to help you with your paper, if they tell you to do something and you don't want to do it, you take responsibility, but you do what you want to do, because it's your paper. Jen says, if I have a student doing poorly in a specific type of activity, I reach out to have a virtual meeting. Absolutely. One of the things that I've done in the new Zoom world, and I have 2 classes this semester that have a synchronous component, 3 classes in the spring, but I will take time during those synchronous meetings via Zoom to do this kind of discussion of what to look for in your feedback. Of course, I'm not going to pull up any of their papers and show everybody the other students' feedback, but using, like I did with the video, having a sample student and showing them how to navigate to it, is really helpful. Sometimes I review the assignment itself if the student, yes, I think that's a big part. That goes all the way back to the beginning of this, but a lot of times when we don't get what we're wanting, it is our responsibility to take a look at what we said we wanted. Because something that is crystal clear in my mind in translation from the student's perspective may not make any sense. I mean, it makes perfect sense to me when I say the word essay, I automatically mean more than one paragraph. But how many of us have asked for essays and gotten 3 sentences? Right? I mean, it happens all the time, in all disciplines, not just in English. So for those of you who are non-English people, like my friend Brenda, you know what I mean too. It's something we have to train students on, especially for those of us who teach in open enrollment schools. Our school, our institution is 100% open enrollment. In the state of Florida, a couple of years ago, our illustrious um, legislature also got rid of any requirements for entrance testing for any student who graduated from a Florida high school after 2007, because now everything is good, and they are college ready. And so we not only can we not test them, but we cannot force them to take developmental classes at all. So you have non-college ready students in basic freshman composition and the math classes that are really struggling just in general. And then you have the added pressure of, okay, well, I have to bring these people up to speed, while I'm still trying to give feedback to the people who I can be a little bit more quick with. Other questions, comments, concerns? I talked a lot faster than I usually do. I'm sorry. Do you use peer? I do use peer review. And here's how I manage it. Because like I said, I'm working on it right now. In fact, this week I've got some peer reviews to deal with. I always put the peer reviews on a discussion board so that it's easier for them to swap papers. On the discussion board, each person has to go in and claim papers. I'm going to review this one and this one. And that way everyone can also see if one paper has no reviews and one paper has 2 reviews. They can't choose the one that already has 2 people who've claimed it. So it helps me manage who is getting left out. But it also doesn't penalize people who are stuck with some. I don't pre-choose those reviewers, because that way somebody doesn't get stuck with somebody who didn't turn it in on time. I haven't really tried out the Canvas peer. I will have to do that. Like I said, the only thing I don't like about assigning peer reviewers is that idea that if I connect Sally and Tom doesn't turn his stuff in on time, then poor Sally is not getting any help. And, poor Tom is doubly not getting any help because he's late and that sort of thing. So that's one reason I've done it the way that I have. Oh, that's a good question too. How do you grade the peer review part? I have, in fact, let me stop sharing and let me see if I have it open. Because like I said, I'm working on them right now. So we have in my, and I'm not going to show it because I've got student work on here, but in my assignment for the peer review, let me pull one up. In my assignment, my rubric for that is very, very simple. They have to do 2 reviews and I just give them 10 points for each review that they do well. And I hate to be that wishy-washy and not specific. However, it helps me meet the students where they are, because for some students, they're going to be able to give really extremely good, solid peer reviews. And for others, they're just not going to be able to do that. Because like I said, with our freshman comps, we have people who barely finished high school, but they're still in the same class with the people who had A's in their high school classes. So I take that into consideration as I'm grading those peer reviews. Peer review through discussion board and Canvas. Yeah, I just find it easier to grade. Oh, that's interesting. Using the peer review component in Canvas doesn't seem to allow a grade to be assigned to it. If anybody knows anything about that, feel free to jump in there. But Canvas peer review lets you change things as you go. Set up a rubric for students to use, as well as a rubric by which you evaluate. Okay, so it's probably, I think that's one of the things about any learning management system. I know that when I learn how to do computer stuff, it is because I have some time and I have a crisis and I have to sit around and fiddle with it until I figure it out. And so it's one reason I haven't used the peer reviews, because I've just found other ways that work for me. Other takeaways, questions, comments, concerns. Let me see if I had anything else. Oh, I do have something else on the PowerPoint that I wanted to show you. So let me reshare that. Oops. I love multitasking on a laptop. We were just joking the other day because our school is giving everyone laptops to use because of working at home. And I've been working on my laptop for a while, so I'm fine with it. But for people who like giant monitors and multiple screens and whatnot, I can't imagine how hard that's going to be for people. So my final thought really on it is that you can fix it. I think a big part of what I want to impart is that if even some of your students learn from and use your feedback, you've made an impact, right? I mean, we are not ever going to get 100% of students to do what we ask them to do, no matter how good of instructions we have, no matter how rock star rubrics we write. I mean, we can have all the most perfectly aligned objectives and rubrics and things in the whole wide world, but we're never going to reach 100% of them. But if you get through to some, I feel like we've done a good job. I will say, and this is one thing I did forget to mention when I was talking about the audio feedback. I have never had students react as specifically and strongly to my feedback as I have since I started doing the audio comments. I don't think it would be that way if I always did audio comments. So I feel like one of the biggest ways that we can fix it is to not use the same method for every single assignment and to mix it up. So in other words, if I've got 3 papers in a literature class, the first one, I'm going to do the audio comments. The second one, I'm going to do the marked up Word document. And the third one, because it's at the end of the semester, I'm just probably going to put my feedback in the comments. Because I feel like if we do the same thing over and over again, they get so immune to it. And I think that's one reason why, it seems like they don't read their feedback, because they probably don't. It's probably, oh, it's the same old thing I've heard from everybody else I've ever had. And so it's just like when we try to get people to do their course evaluations at the end of the semester, they feel like, I've done this before. It's not doing me any good. So I feel like that's a big part of it. So again, communication, clarify how and when feedback will be provided. And of course, that's a quality matters issue as well. Promising how long it's going to take to get that feedback back. Explain when it's too late to expect detailed feedback. This is a big one for me, because if someone is turning a paper in 3 weeks late, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to be able to spend the same amount of time on it as I did when I sat down to grade all of those papers. And so I do put that in my syllabus and in my information, to explain when you're not going to get that detailed feedback. And then, of course, as we've been talking about, placing the ball in the learner's court and actually getting them to give you feedback on your feedback, in whatever method works for you. Okay, let's go back to the chat.
Jackie, we have 5 more minutes left in the session.
Okay, awesome. We'll take a look at these chat items and then open it up for final thoughts and questions. I just did peer reviews of theses and had the reviewer just tell the reviewer to restate what they think in argument in their own words, since the reviewers don't yet feel confident. Yes, I think that's the other downside of peer review, is that they don't feel confident. So of course they're not going to be critical. And so we have to teach them how to do that. You have to set up a separate place to grade the peer review in Canvas. Okay. And I can see doing that. I have some assignments that are kind of outside of Canvas that I have to set those up for. So I know what you mean. Plug external monitors in. I agree. I know I get tired of reading it, and to hear or see feedback makes a different impact. Yes, I think it's just one of those things. When we get the same thing over and over again, we eventually tune it out, and we're just as guilty. I know that when we first started having meetings, faculty meetings by Zoom, I was all excited because it was something different. And now I'm just like, oh gosh, and let me hide myself again. I'm going to try the audio comment. Yes, I do try it. I will say I was super surprised at how many students said something about it, and it was all positive. I have not had anybody complain about it. I have had some people who couldn't listen to it. And of course, you have to be cognizant of that. Especially, of course, if you know for a fact they have hearing issues, but even sometimes it's a technology issue. Has anyone asked students to put in submission comments I think that's a great idea. Having them ask questions about like specifically what they want help with. I do that sometimes in peer review, like have them say to their peers, I'm really struggling with my introduction. Can you look at that specifically? I think that's helpful in peer reviews as well. I really like the idea of changing up the way. Yes, changing it up, I think is key. Ask them what they are most happy with. Extra points on the rubric. That's a good suggestion. Self-complete a rubric. Oh, I like that. 360-degree evaluations, just like we all have to do now. Excellent. Well, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate your time today. And I hope you enjoyed my rudimentary artwork as well as thinking about feedback. So I appreciate it. And Jade, thank you for being a great room host.
Jackie, thank you so much for a wonderful presentation today.
Yay.